My husband had drained my savings for years, funding his mistress behind my back. After years of dedication and relentless effort, I had finally reached retirement. The day I walked away from the company, I felt weightless, as if a burden had been lifted, humming softly as I stepped through my front door. Eager to begin mapping out the peaceful, worry-free future I had long envisioned, I grabbed my bank card, ready to admire the savings I had built over a lifetime. But as soon as my eyes landed on the account balance, everything inside me froze. Just $155,000. I stood motionless, silence stretching through the room, my mind struggling to process the crushing reality in front of me. My man never admitted the full truth, not then. He clung to his story of helping a friend in dire straits, painting himself as a selfless martyr, and me as a cold, unfeeling shrew for even questioning his generosity. My head throbbed. I remembered all the times I'd wanted to buy something nice, a small luxury, a comfortable chair, a slightly better cut of meat, and Lewis had sighed, rubbing his temples, talking about an uncertain future, the need for austerity. And now I know that austerity for me, abundance for his Bianca. It started when I could no longer swallow. "You're insane. Have you lost your mind? How dare you hit me? We're married. Your money is my money. What's the big deal if I spent some of it?" He'd roared after the slap, the mask of the gentle put-upon husband slipping to reveal something ugly and entitled beneath. I stared at him, at the arrogant twist of his mouth, the entitlement in his voice, and I realized I didn't even recognize this man anymore. "Lewis," I'd said, my voice dangerously quiet, "if you're still hung up on Bianca, just say it. Don't insult me with this living allowance. Bianca's an old friend. She's had a rough life. I was just helping out, that's all." His voice was casual, indifferent, but every word felt like another twist of the knife. "Helping out?" I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "With my money? You were helping your old flame and her kid live comfortably while I was pinching pennies, denying myself everything? I wouldn't even buy a decent pair of shoes, Lewis, because you convinced me we couldn't afford it, and you were showering her with money behind my back." The fury I'd held in for so long finally broke loose. My voice rose, sharp and shaking. "You let me live like we were barely scraping by, while you played secret benefactor to the woman you couldn't let go of. You told me to be frugal for our future, but all along, you were just funneling my sacrifices to someone else." Lewis fell silent, staring at me as if I had wounded him. "Stella," he said softly, his voice laced with a feigned hurt that made my stomach churn. "We've been married for decades. Is this really how little you think of me?" He was trying to guilt me, to make me doubt my own righteous anger. I remembered all the times I'd tried to protect his ego. When we were younger, he made less money than I did, and it ate at him. He was proud, fragile in his pride, so I let him handle the finances, thinking I was giving him a sense of control, a sense of dignity. But in the end, what I gave him wasn't dignity, it was opportunity, and he'd used it to betray me in the most profound way. I took a deep breath, my voice trembling now. "Do you remember when Matt was 10? He fell down the stairs, broke his leg, needed surgery." Lewis furrowed his brow, saying nothing, but a flicker of something, unease, crossed his face. "I begged you, Lewis. I begged you to pull out some of our savings to cover the medical bills. But you refused. You said the money was in a fixed-term deposit, that it couldn't be touched. You told me to go borrow from neighbors, from colleagues, anyone who'd lend us a hand." Tears welled in my eyes again, hot and bitter. That night, I knocked on door after door in a freezing storm, humiliated, begging people to lend us money. Money, while you were hoarding cash to raise her child. My fingertips were numb from the cold, but my heart felt like it was on fire. You used my money, our money, to support another woman. That disgusts me. As the last word left my lips, Lewis's face twisted. He gasped, his hand clutching his chest. He stumbled backward, his legs seeming to give way beneath him, and then he collapsed onto the floor. For a second, I just froze. Everything around me went silent, just me, him, and the sound of my own heart pounding in my ears like a war drum. I hesitated, a storm of conflicting emotions raging within me. But in the end, after 40 years, some residue of shared life, however tainted, remained. I couldn't just walk away. I knelt down and helped him up, my touch surprisingly gentle despite the inferno in my soul. No matter how deeply he had shattered my heart, those 4 decades couldn't be erased in an instant. I took him to the hospital. After the doctors completed their initial examinations and arranged for further tests, I stepped out of his room and called Matt, our son. I told him his father was in the hospital, that he needed to come. Then, I turned around and walked out of those sterile, echoing corridors, alone. I couldn't bear to look at Lewis's face anymore. Couldn't bear to be in the same room as the architect of my ruin. Back home, the house felt oppressively quiet. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room echoed through the stillness, each second landing like a cold drop of water in an empty, hollow room. 40 years of marriage, undone by a ledger and a few handwritten notes. I thought back to the early days with Lewis. He hadn't always been a bad man. He was kind, even gentle in his own quiet way. His only real flaw, if you could even call it that back then, was his stinginess. But stingy didn't quite capture it. It was a deep-rooted, obsessive frugality, almost pathological. I remembered one particular winter, years ago. He'd bought huge sacks of potatoes and carrots because they were on sale, just to save a few extra bucks. Even when the potatoes started sprouting, turning soft and green, he refused to throw them out. He said I could just cut around the bad parts, that they'd be fine. That winter, I ended up in the emergency room with a serious case of food poisoning. Even then, I tried to reason with him, tried to be kind. "Lewis," I'd said, my voice weak from illness, "we've got some savings. We don't have to live like this." But he'd just brushed it off, murmuring vague excuses about preparing for the future, always dodging the truth. I'd thought it was just a habit, a harmless quirk from a man who'd grown up poor, who was terrified of insecurity. I never imagined he was hoarding money, my money, to support another woman and her child. The thought made my chest tighten again, a familiar ache spreading through my ribs. I couldn't sleep that night. Around midnight, I found myself back in the study, the ledger in my hands again. Line by line, I went through it, calculating every last penny. By the time I finished, a chilling numbness had settled deep in my bones. Over the past 30 years, Lewis had transferred more than $1.3 million to Bianca. That wasn't just money. That was my life's work. Decades of labor, every late night, every sacrifice, every moment I'd held back, denying myself for the sake of our future. And then, tucked in the very back of the ledger, I found an old photograph. My fingers trembled as I pulled it out. In the picture, a younger Lewis stood smiling, his arm around Bianca, who was also smiling, radiating a smug sort of triumph. Beside them stood a boy, about 10 years old, Matt, our son, and another boy, slightly older, Bianca's son, no doubt. They were all standing together on a sunny park lawn, looking for all the world like one happy little family. I stared at that photo for a long, long time, barely breathing, unsure if what I was seeing was even real. In that moment, whatever strength I had left, whatever resilience I'd clung to, drained out of me. I sank down onto the study sofa, the photograph clutched in my hand, and just sat there, silent, hollow. My entire life felt like a joke, a cruel, elaborate farce. A bitter, humorless smile crept across my face. I took out my phone and calmly, methodically, began photographing every page of the ledger, every damning entry, every picture, every scribbled note. I saved everything. This was no longer just about heartbreak, this was about evidence. The next morning, Lewis came home from the hospital. He walked in with his head low, his eyes filled with a carefully curated guilt, looking more like a scolded child than a grown man who had perpetrated a decades-long betrayal. Matt followed closely behind, giving his father a subtle nod, as if encouraging him to deliver a rehearsed speech. Lewis hesitated, then approached me and gently took my hand. His voice was low, his eyes suspiciously wet. "Stella," he began, his tone soft and penitent. I'm sorry. I was too emotional yesterday. I shouldn't have said those things. Please don't hold it against me. He paused, then added, his voice laced with manufactured sorrow. I never told you because I didn't want you to worry. Bianca had a hard life. She made some bad choices when she was young, trusted the wrong man, ended up raising that child all alone. And that poor kid, he has a congenital heart condition. He's been in and out of hospital since he was little. His voice cracked, and a single perfectly timed tear rolled down his weathered cheek. His face was a mask of sorrow and regret. Matt chimed in right away, picking up the thread seamlessly. Mom, seriously. I mean, if you think about it, maybe this was just, I don't know, a way to do some good in the world. Bianca's life hasn't been easy. Try to understand her situation. Please don't be so angry. I looked at the two of them, father and son, echoing each other like a well-rehearsed act, and I felt nothing. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, not even the sharp sting of pain anymore. All I heard was, Bianca's had it hard. Bianca's struggling. Bianca needs understanding. No one spared a thought for me, the woman who had worked, saved, sacrificed, trusted, and been monumentally betrayed. They were mourning for a woman I never owed anything to, while dismissing the profound hurt of the woman who had built this home, this life, this family. And with every good intention they tried to wrap their deception in, they only crushed what little fragile trust I had left. When I heard that, I couldn't help but turn to look at Matt, my eyes filled with a cold disbelief. A $1.3 million act of kindness, Matt. How generous of him. This from the same man who used to scrutinize every single grocery receipt, who quibbled over nickels and dimes with me, yet had no problem pouring a fortune into a woman who wasn't even part of this family. And suddenly, it hit me with the force of a physical blow. I hadn't really known my own son at all. I decided to test the waters. You knew about all this, Matt. His shoulders stiffened, and for a fleeting moment, a flicker of genuine guilt crossed his face. Then he gave a forced, uneasy laugh. I mean, only what Dad mentioned, you know, bits and pieces. That's all. Don't overthink it, Mum. I looked at the two of them, father and son, in perfect, sickening sync, and all I could do was laugh, a bitter, hollow sound that seemed to surprise even myself. So, I was the only one left in the dark. The woman who had loved this family, supported it for decades, was the only one who didn't know the truth. My husband, the man I'd spent my life with, and my son, the boy I raised with my own hands, had both been standing on someone else's side all along. It was absurd, utterly, painfully absurd. A tightness grew in my chest, the hurt impossible to contain now. Stella, come on, Lewis said again, switching to that familiar, soft, placating tone he always used when he wanted to smooth things over, to make a problem disappear without actually addressing it. We've been together so many years. Don't make this into a big scene. That was his pattern, playing the pitiful old man, leaning on sentiment, hiding behind decades of marriage like it was an impenetrable shield. There was a time when those words would have softened me, made me second-guess myself, made me want to keep the peace at any cost. But not anymore. I looked him straight in the eyes, my voice calm but firm, devoid of the hysteria he probably expected. If you want to help Bianca, Lewis, that's your business. But you don't get to use my money. I'm sorry, but I'm not that generous. 40 years of marriage, $1.3 million. You pay it back, every single cent, and then, maybe, I'll pretend none of this ever happened. His expression changed instantly, his face twisting as if I'd just flipped a switch from contrite to furious. He yanked his hand from mine, his voice, suddenly thick with rage. Are you out of your mind? $1.3 million? Where do you expect me to get that kind of money? Bianca is my best friend. I thought you'd understand. I always thought you were compassionate, that you cared about people. Turns out you're just cold-hearted and selfish. He looked at me like he was the one betrayed, like I was the unreasonable one. I felt a chill run through me, and then I laughed again, short, cold, bitter. Moral guilt trips, his favorite tactic. But I wasn't the naive 20-something woman he'd married. I'd spent decades working in a demanding company, navigating office politics, dealing with people of every conceivable kind. Did he really think a few manipulative words, a display of theatrical indignation, could break me now? I was about to walk away when Matt cut in again, his voice edged with an impatience that grated on my already frayed nerves. "Mom, do you really have to make this such a big deal? I mean, come on. Aunt Bianca's had it rough. Let's just drop it. No more money from now on, okay?" The way he said Aunt Bianca, so familiar, so casual, warmer than anything he'd said to me all day, made my stomach turn. And suddenly I realized, if someone else had been standing in the room, an impartial observer, they'd probably think she was his real mother, not me. Their hearts, their loyalty, had clearly left me long ago. So why should I keep clinging to the hollow shell of this family? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay composed, to keep the tremor from my voice. Then I looked Lewis squarely in the face and said, in the calmest, most resolute voice I'd ever spoken, "I want a divorce." The words came out quietly, but they echoed with a chilling finality. They were not an outburst. They were a decision, forged in sleepless nights and tear-stained silence. Lewis stared at me, stunned into momentary silence. Then his face contorted with anger. "No," he growled, his voice low and dangerous, through clenched teeth. "Absolutely not. I won't divorce you, over my dead body." I looked at him, this man who had betrayed me, lied to me, used me, and I just couldn't understand it. If you loved her so much, why couldn't you just leave with her? Why hang on to me, to this charade, like this? But I didn't ask. I didn't want to hear the answer anymore. I was done. Bianca heard about the tension between us," he said, his voice almost sheepish, avoiding my gaze. She wants to meet you, to talk, to clear the air." I simply nodded, not because I had any desire to mend this irrevocably broken marriage, but out of a grim, detached curiosity. I wanted to see her. I wanted to see what kind of woman was worth my husband, secretly siphoning away over $1 million of our life savings, worth destroying 40 years of shared history. Lewis quickly arranged the meeting. What I didn't expect was that Bianca didn't come alone. Matt showed up too, and he brought Mason, my grandson, with him. "Grandma Bianca, you smell so nice." "You're my favorite," Mason shouted, flinging himself into Bianca's arms with a pure, unadulterated delight that cut me to the core. Bianca's smile bloomed instantly, radiant and maternal, as she gently held him close, her lips curling into a soft, practiced smile. Something inside me sank, a cold, heavy stone dropping into the pit of my stomach. This didn't feel like a peace offering. It felt like a coronation. She didn't come here to reconcile. She came to claim her place, to stake her territory, like she had already become the queen of this household. And the worst part was, maybe she had. I stood there, frozen, watching my grandson nuzzle into the arms of a woman I barely knew, a woman who had been the secret beneficiary of my life's work, and my eyes began to sting. She had woven herself into the fabric of my family, into my husband, my son, even my grandson, while I was still naively living under the illusion of security, of a shared life. "Mom, finally, Bianca's been waiting for you." "What took you so long?" Matt said, his tone casual, almost impatient, that subtle, undercutting note of blame, like I was the one disrupting the harmony of this cozy little family, jabbing straight through me. It cut deeper than anything else. Bianca turned toward me, her smile sweet, almost cloying. "Stella, it's been so long. You look wonderful." I managed a polite, stiff nod and a forced, brittle smile. She slipped easily into small talk, speaking like we'd always been old friends, like there wasn't a chasm of betrayal and deceit yawning between us. And in no time, she steered the conversation, with practiced ease, toward herself. "Stella, I've never had an easy life," she began, her voice trembling with carefully modulated emotion. "I was young and foolish, you know, believed in the wrong man, ended up raising a child all alone. And my poor boy, he was born with a heart condition, years of hospital visits, medications. It's been so hard." Her eyes filled with tears, and soon they spilled over, streaking her carefully applied makeup. She clutched my hand, as if seeking comfort, or more likely validation, her grip surprisingly strong. Lewis, sitting beside her, looked heartbroken, his face a study in sympathetic anguish. Without hesitation, he took her other hand in his touch gentle, protective. "Don't cry, Bianca," he murmured, his voice soft, tender, intimate in a way he hadn't been with me in years, if ever. "As long as I'm here, you'll never suffer again." And in that moment I realized he hadn't forgotten how to love, how to be gentle, how to be tender. He'd just chosen to give it all to someone else. Matt chimed in, his smile wide and reassuring. "Yeah, Aunt Bianca, you've always been so good to me and Mason. Don't worry. Anything you need, we're here for you." I looked around at the scene, at Lewis, Bianca, Matt, Mason, and felt like a stranger in my own life, an unwelcome intruder at their private party. A hollow, icy feeling crept up from deep within me, chilling me to the bone. I took a breath, then said, my voice colder than I intended, "You love her so much. Then divorce me, marry her. At least then you'll have a good excuse for all of this." The room went silent. Lewis's face went rigid, his jaw clenching. He turned quickly to Bianca, his expression apologetic, solicitous. "Don't mind her. She's just been upset lately." She didn't mean it. Bianca, ever the gracious victim, waved it off with a forgiving, saintly smile. "It's okay, Lewis. I'm the one who owes Stella an apology. I should have come forward sooner." I opened my mouth to speak, to tell her exactly what I thought of her belated, self-serving apology, but Lewis cut me off again, his voice sharp, defensive. "What apology? You don't need to apologize for anything, Bianca. That money, I gave it because I wanted to. Don't let this weigh on your conscience. I'll handle things with Stella." Then he looked at me with that same condescending, dismissive smile he'd always used when my feelings were inconvenient. "She's just being temperamental. I'll calm her down." As if I was some stubborn child throwing a tantrum, to be placated and managed. But he'd forgotten something crucial. I wasn't that woman anymore. He still believed, deep down, that I would never actually leave him. Truth is, I used to believe that too, but not anymore. Especially not now, after all the rotten, festering secrets behind this so-called life had finally, brutally, come to light. I was more certain than ever of one thing. I would never again be anyone's fool. Even if I dropped dead tomorrow, I'd make damn sure these people didn't walk away unscathed. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay level as I looked at Lewis and Matt. "I'd like to speak to Bianca, alone." The moment the words left my mouth, I saw Lewis tense up, his eyes darting nervously between me and Bianca. "Why? Why can't we all just talk here?" Bianca is not in good health. You don't need to upset her." He said it like I was some kind of ticking bomb, a dangerous, unpredictable force, and she was a fragile porcelain doll that might shatter from a sharp word, a harsh glance. The pain in my chest twisted again, sharp, sudden, agonizing. So, this was how far his instinct to protect her went. The deeper his loyalty to her showed, the more ridiculous, the more pathetic my decades-long marriage felt. A cruel, elaborate joke played on me, with my own life as the punchline. And if I couldn't reclaim even a shred of justice, a sliver of dignity, before I died, I knew I'd never rest in peace. I forced a bitter smile, my voice calm but laced with a dangerous irony. "I just want to talk. After all, she spent decades enjoying the fruits of my labor. A simple conversation doesn't seem like too much to ask, does it?" Bianca bit her lip, her eyes wide in a performance of delicate, apprehensive concern. "Lewis, it's fine," she said softly, her voice like silk, like she was a saint volunteering for martyrdom. "Stella's upset. Let her vent. It might help her feel better." The moment she said it, Lewis shot me a glare, a look that clearly communicated I was the unreasonable one, the source of all this unpleasantness. I nearly laughed. The older they get, the more skilled these sugar-coated manipulators become. A few minutes later, the living room was empty, just me and Bianca facing off. The air crackled with unspoken animosity. But the moment the others were out of earshot, the sweet, gentle, victimized facade she wore outside evaporated. Her eyes narrowed, her posture shifted, and a smug, confident arrogance returned, an expression I vaguely remembered from our youth. "Oh, please," she scoffed, lifting her chin, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're 65, Stella, and you're still throwing tantrums like some lovesick teenager over a divorce." She laughed, a short, mocking sound. "Here's some friendly advice for old time's sake. Just pretend none of this happened. Play dumb. Live out your days in peace. No one's going to give you a medal for being the dramatic, scorned wife." Her voice was like sandpaper, grating on my nerves, like I was some pitiful joke she'd grown tired of watching. I stared at her, and for a moment, I was pulled straight back to our youth. We'd never gotten along. Yes, she was beautiful, but she was also a disaster in school, always trailing at the bottom of the class, while I, average in looks, was consistently at the top of the rankings, year after year. Her parents constantly compared her to me, using me as their benchmark to scold her, to highlight her failings. Naturally, she grew to hate me. No, to resent me, with a passion that bordered on obsession. So much so that she once had a few of her admirers corner me after class, intending to teach me a lesson. But I was never one to be bullied. I saw it coming and had called the cops before they could even lay a finger on me. It caused a huge stir. She was disciplined by the school, and whatever fake, strained civility we had managed to maintain completely disintegrated. And now, decades later, here we were again, sitting across from each other, still tangled in conflict, still at odds. But I wasn't the same naive girl I used to be. I wouldn't play the fool for a man, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let her waltz in and act like this was her victory lap. I leaned in slightly, my voice as cold as ice, matching hers. "Bianca, you've always acted like you were above everyone else, like the world owed you something. But in the end, you spent decades as someone's dirty little secret, someone's side piece, living off another woman's hard work. Doesn't that feel pathetic?" Her eyebrow twitched, and the smugness on her face faltered, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. I smiled, a cold, deliberate smile. "Out of old time's sake, Bianca, I'll do you a favor. I'll hand him over. Take him. He's all yours. I hope you two enjoy each other's company for the rest of your miserable, parasitic lives. But you owe me $1.3 million, and I expect every single cent back." My words sliced through the air like a blade, but Bianca didn't flinch, not visibly. She leaned back in her seat, tilting her head with a smirk, looking completely, infuriatingly at ease. "You think you can scare me into giving you anything?" She let out a soft, contemptuous laugh, like she'd just heard the punchline to a ridiculous joke. "You're really cute when you try to act tough, Stella. That money was a gift. From Lewis. Why on earth would I give it back to you?" I looked at her, this woman who had feasted on my life, and let out a soft chuckle of my own. Ignorance really is fearless, isn't it? She thought I'd spent all these years just cooking, cleaning, and quietly playing the devoted, clueless wife. She had no idea I'd long since learned how to protect myself, not just with loyalty, but with the law. Even in divorce, I could reclaim every cent legally. But I wouldn't tell her that, because uncertainty, that creeping, gnawing fear of the unknown, is the most effective punishment of all. I looked at her coolly. "You really think Lewis and Matt being on your side means you've won? Open your eyes, Bianca. Lewis has been a pitiful little man his whole life, good at saving pennies, useless at everything else that truly matters. And Matt, he's a man-child who couldn't land a decent job without riding my coattails and tapping into my connections. You think, without me, the two of them could keep supporting the cozy little life you've grown so accustomed to? Think again." A flicker of genuine panic crossed her face then, just a crack in her composure, but it was enough. It was deeply satisfying. I smirked, turned on my heel, and headed for the door. And there they all were, Lewis, Matt, and Mason, hovering anxiously just outside, their ears practically pressed to the wood. The moment I stepped out, not one of them even looked at me. They rushed past me like I didn't exist, crowding around Bianca with exaggerated, solicitous concern. I stood in the doorway, watching the scene, this picture-perfect little family unit I no longer belonged to, a family built on my stolen money and her calculated deceit. I let out a dry, cynical laugh, turned away, and walked out without a second glance. This time, I was truly, irrevocably, done. I felt no love for this house, no lingering attachment to these people, not my son, not my husband. They were no longer mine. That very night, I called my attorney. Not just for a divorce. I wanted everything that was mine. Every penny, every asset, taken back. The lawyer was straightforward, professional, and blessedly unsentimental. Lewis's unauthorized transfers from my personal account, into which my salary was directly deposited, were legally questionable, to say the least. The house, thankfully, was listed solely under my name. It had been part of my employment benefits package from Smith Home Services years ago. I had the right to claim a significant portion, if not all, of our marital assets in the divorce, especially given the circumstances. After the call, I wasted no time. I called a locksmith and had every single lock in the house changed. This was my home. The deed bore my name. I'd kept quiet, tolerated his presence for all these years out of a misguided respect for our marriage, for the illusion of family. That chapter was closed. Now, from this moment on, everything would be clearly defined, every dollar, every inch of space. That evening, Lewis came home. He tried his key, fumbled with it, then tried again, a look of bewildered frustration dawning on his face as the lock failed to budge. Moments later, my phone buzzed. It was him. I didn't bother answering. I walked calmly to the door, unlocked it from the inside, and then, with a grim satisfaction, tossed all his luggage and personal belongings out onto the porch. "Lewis," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, "I told you. I want a divorce." He stood there amidst his scattered possessions, shaking with a rage that contorted his features. "Stella, you're too old to be throwing these childish tantrums. First, you go after Bianca, a sick woman. Now you're locking me out of my own house. You think you're still 20, huh? What are you going to do after the divorce? Rot alone in here until someone finds your corpse?" His shouting echoed up the stairwell, loud and pathetic under the stark porch light. His white hair, usually so neatly combed, seemed to stand on end, glowing starkly. He no longer looked like the gentle, mild-mannered man I'd married, the man I once thought I loved. He looked like what he truly was, a bitter, cornered old man, desperate and showing his worst, ugliest self. I said nothing. I simply reached behind the door, picked up a folder, and tossed it at his feet. The divorce papers. "Whether I rot or not is none of your business, Lewis. All you need to do is sign." His pupils dilated as he fumbled with the pages, his hands shaking. He flipped straight to the asset division section, his eyes scanning the dense legal text. His face turned a blotchy, unattractive beet red. "You're insane," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You want to leave me with absolutely nothing, and make me pay you another $1 million on top of it? Have you lost your damn mind? I've been supporting this family all these years, taking care of everything. Don't I get any credit for that?" I stared at him with icy calm, saying nothing. Then, without warning, he lunged toward the door, trying to force his way back in. The next morning, I gathered everything. Every document, every bank statement, every damning record, every bit of evidence. I packed up Lewis's financial ledgers, the photographs, and all the recordings of our recent illuminating conversations, and sent them straight to my attorney. If Lewis wouldn't sign the divorce papers willingly, then the law would make him. A few hours later, my lawyer personally served him with the official divorce petition at Bianca's apartment. He hadn't expected me to move so swiftly, so decisively. He and Bianca, I was told, completely lost control, yelling, shouting, even trying to physically throw the attorney out of the house. But this time, I wasn't backing down. This time, there would be no reconciliation, no forgiveness, no return to the status quo. Shortly after, Matt called again. This time, his voice was practically shaking with fury. Mom, what the hell is wrong with you? You've got a heart of stone. Dad passed out from the stress. They had to call an ambulance. And you're still pushing like this? What do you want? Do you want him dead? I could hear his rage crackling through the phone, his voice rising to a hysterical shout. And yet, all I felt was a slow, aching weight in my chest, something heavy and dull, sinking deeper with every accusation, every misplaced sentiment. I didn't respond. I simply closed the phone gently and set it down on the table. They'd hurt me, betrayed me, lied to me over and over again, and now they wanted to play the victims, as if they were the ones wronged, as if all of this, every fracture, every scar, every broken piece of our lives was somehow my fault. It was laughable, utterly, painfully ironic. I didn't waste another breath on Matt's tantrum. I simply ended the call and, with a decisive click, cut him off completely. I was done. Done pouring my time, my energy, my heart into people who only knew how to take. From that moment on, everything would go through my attorney. Clean, swift, and blessedly emotionless. While I waited for the court date, Lewis and Bianca seemed to be living quite the carefree, even celebratory life. They played the part of the blissful retirees, finally free to be together, perfectly, as if none of this sordid mess had anything to do with me at all. Lewis even, rather surprisingly, learned how to use social media. He started posting photos on Facebook, photos of candlelit dinners, braised chicken with mushrooms, grilled steak, Caesar salad, pasta with red wine. It was surreal, almost hallucinatory, to see him presenting these meals, so elaborate, so indulgent, the kind of meals he'd always claimed we couldn't afford. The captions were even more galling. Cooking for the one you love. Life's greatest joy, he wrote under one. He shared snapshots of him and Bianca strolling through shopping malls, arms linked, smiles wide and beaming. Under one particularly saccharine photo of them gazing into each other's eyes, he'd written, "Love from youth, still by my side in old age. Blessed." The tenderness in his eyes as he looked at Bianca in those pictures. That was something I had never once seen directed at me, not in 40 years. I used to beg him to go grocery shopping with me, just for the company, to take a walk downtown on a Sunday afternoon, just to spend some time together, like normal couples did. He always claimed his back hurt, said he was too tired, too stressed from work. I even offered to take him to see a doctor for his persistent back pain. Now I realized it had nothing to do with his back. He just didn't want to be with me. The bitter irony was, their little parade of domestic bliss, their public declarations of undying love, turned out to be the most useful part of my case. My attorney moved fast, handling everything with precise, ruthless efficiency. I rejected all offers of mediation, all attempts at a negotiated settlement. My stance was crystal clear: full repayment, full divorce, no compromises. And soon enough, the court date was set. When the day came, Lewis and Bianca arrived at the courthouse together, a united front of aggrieved innocence. Matt followed closely behind, standing beside them like some loyal, misguided bodyguard. At that point, whatever remnants of family we once had, whatever fragile threads still connected us, were long gone, severed completely. Matt looked at me with a sneer, letting out a sharp, dismissive snort as I walked past. "Dragging this into court at your age? What a disgrace. Bianca and Dad have been nothing but kind to you, and you're still trying to tear them apart. What kind of person are you?" Every word was laced with judgment, with contempt, like I was the villain in some twisted fairy tale. The evil wife, the bitter mother, the ungrateful, vengeful old woman. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I walked past him and entered the courtroom without so much as a glance back. This wasn't about justifying myself to him anymore. This was about winning. The proceedings began quickly, with the meticulously kept ledgers, the bank transaction records, the voice recordings of Lewis's admissions and Bianca's smug dismissal, and the damning screenshots of Lewis's public declarations of affection for Bianca on social media. All of it, neatly documented and submitted as evidence, my case was airtight. The judgment came swiftly and decisively. Bianca was ordered to repay every single cent Lewis had funneled from my personal accounts. $1.35 million in total. And our marriage, after 40 long, wasted years, was officially, irrevocably, dissolved by court order. There was no ceremony, no tearful goodbyes, no reluctant signature on a divorce certificate, just a crisp impersonal legal decree to mark the end of a 40-year mistake. When I stepped out of that courthouse, the sun hit my face. I tilted my head upward, breathing in the light, the fresh air, and for the first time in years, I felt clean, unburdened, free. I had finally, definitively, closed the door on a life that had been suffocating me, a life built on lies and illusions. And now, here I was, recently retired, with a house solely in my name, a substantial sum of money rightfully returned to my account, no stingy, self-righteous, gaslighting husband weighing me down, and no son who saw me as nothing more than a financial resource and an emotional punching bag. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, my life truly belonged to me. As for Lewis and Bianca, the cracks on their faces, the shock, the disbelief, were unmistakable as they left the courthouse. Their comfortable lifestyle had always depended on me, on my labor, my earnings, my blind trust, my willingness to believe their lies. They had almost nothing to fall back on, no real assets of their own. And Matt, despite all his self-righteous grandstanding, his fierce defense of his father and Aunt Bianca, was nothing more than a taker himself. He'd never provide for them, not a cent beyond what was absolutely necessary to maintain his own carefully constructed image. The only way for Lewis and Bianca to pay back that $1.35 million judgment was to sell their house. And that house, the one directly across from Matt's, the one they clung to so proudly as a symbol of their ill-gotten comfort, the one Bianca had probably envisioned as her retirement haven. I had paid the down payment on that house, with my money, funneled through Lewis. So really, all they were doing was returning what was mine in the first place. Once I realized that, I felt something shift inside me. That heavy crushing weight that had pressed on my chest for years, it finally, blessedly, lifted. Everything they spent, everything they took, everything they thought they got away with, it was all coming back to me, every last cent, every inch, and I wouldn't leave a single piece behind. Stella, wait! Lewis caught up to me on the courthouse steps, Bianca trailing a few paces behind, her face pale and drawn. After all these years, do you really have to push me this far? Lewis stood before me, his shoulders slumped, his face a mask of defeat, his voice heavy with a weariness that seemed to age him years in a matter of moments. Bianca, everything I have, this house, this money, this life, was earned, $1 at a time, through decades of hard work, not through tears, or pity, or groveling. Then I turned to Lewis, my voice like flint. Stop dreaming about things that don't belong to you, Lewis. Sell the house, pay what you owe, and move on. Whatever happens to you afterward is no longer my concern. With that, I shoved Bianca's hand off my skirt, turned my back on them both, and walked away without looking back. A few days later, Lewis finally caved. The house was listed and sold, surprisingly quickly. The full repayment, down to the last dollar, was transferred to my attorney's trust account. On the day of the sale, as I was stepping outside my own home for my afternoon walk, he was there, by the front door of his now former residence across the street, overseeing the last of the moving boxes. He couldn't resist one last parting shot. He stood by the curb, his face a mask of impotent fury, and spat, "Stella, marrying you was the worst mistake of my life. Bianca and I will grow old together in peace. You'll die alone, clutching your precious money." I didn't even flinch. I didn't turn around. I simply smiled. A small, private smile. The money was in my hands. They had nothing but each other and the bitter taste of their own choices. The outcome couldn't have been clearer. Not long after, Lewis and Bianca got married. A quiet, subdued affair, I heard. Then they moved in with Matt, his wife Lily, and their young son Mason, along with Bianca's now grown son, Andre. the one with the supposed congenital heart condition. 6 people crammed under one roof. The fairy tale, the blissful new beginning Lewis had crowed about on Facebook, quickly unraveled. Turns out, living together in cramped quarters, under constant financial strain and simmering resentments, wasn't quite the same as occasional visits, cheerful dinners, and secret liaisons. Bianca, who used to help with Mason out of what appeared to be goodwill, or more likely, a calculated effort to endear herself to Matt, was now expected by Matt and Lily to function as a full-time, unpaid nanny. One day, according to a distraught Lily who called me in tears, Andre lost control during an argument and shoved Mason, my grandson, so hard that the boy hit his head on the corner of a table and needed stitches. That evening, my phone rang. It was Lily, Matt's wife, her voice shaking with a mixture of tears and fury. Stella, I can't take this anymore. That boy, Andre, he's out of control. There's something wrong with him. He's violent, unpredictable. I'm scared of what he'll do next. I'm running this whole household on my own, working full-time, and then coming home to this chaos. Mason's acting out, the baby won't stop crying, and every adult in this house is either yelling or sulking in silence. I don't know how I'm supposed to live like this anymore. Her voice cracked, half frustration, half desperation. Stella, can you help me? I knew what she meant. She wanted me to come back, to step in, to mediate, to fix things, to hold everything together again, just like I always had. The backbone, the fixer, the quiet, dependable woman who kept this dysfunctional family from completely collapsing under the weight of its own secrets and selfishness. But I couldn't. Not anymore. Because the truth was, we were no longer a family. I listened to Lily's tearful plea, a familiar ache in my chest, not for them, but for the innocents lost, for the collateral damage. I sighed quietly before replying, my voice calm but resolute. Lily, if your schedule gets too overwhelming, I can help pick up and drop off Mason from school. But anything beyond that, I'm sorry, Lily. I just can't. A flash of embarrassment, or perhaps understanding, crossed her face, audible even over the phone. She nodded, her voice small. Thank you, Stella. I understand. I offered a few more comforting, non-committal words before ending the call. Then, I put on my coat and stepped outside. Lily called again, this time sobbing, almost incoherent. Stella, I can't take it anymore. Please, can you watch Mason for a few days? She kept repeating herself, her voice unraveling with every choked word. I swear, I think I want a divorce. I paused, surprised by the raw desperation in her voice, but I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to be pulled back into anyone else's mess, anyone else's drama. But I understood her pain, her breaking point, because I'd lived it. And this wasn't a tantrum. This was genuine heartbreak, the sound of a woman at the end of her rope. So I said yes. When I arrived at their house to pick up Mason, I was just reaching the front door when the yelling inside, loud and ugly, stopped me in my tracks. Lewis, can you believe Matt? He's kicking out my son, my Andre. Like he's nothing. Bianca's voice screeched from behind the closed door, shrill and accusatory. Andre isn't well. He needs care. He needs understanding. Matt's trying to drive us out. He's trying to destroy me. Then Matt's voice snapped back, colder, harder than I'd ever heard it. Andre is almost 30 years old, Bianca. What's he still doing living here like a child, expecting everyone to cater to him? He seems perfectly fine to me when he's causing trouble. I don't care what his supposed issues are anymore. He shouted at Lily. He pushed Mason. Either he goes, or you both do. My wife isn't a nursemaid for your grown, delinquent son. The house, once a symbol of their supposed blended family bliss, had clearly descended into chaos. I stood quietly outside, listening to the ugly, inevitable unraveling of the happy home they once so proudly flaunted. Not so perfect now, was it? What they once mistook for peace and warmth had never been real. It was just me, holding everything together, quietly, patiently, invisibly. The moment I walked away, Their carefully constructed facade cracked wide open, revealing nothing but discord, dysfunction, and disarray beneath. I didn't knock. I simply sent Lily a text, asking her to bring Mason outside. She opened the door a few minutes later, her eyes red-rimmed and trembling, Mason clinging to her leg. The moment she saw me, she collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Stella, I really can't do this anymore. I'm taking care of everyone. Bianca, her son, Mason, the baby, and all they do is complain, criticize, demand. Do you know what she did last week? Bianca? She took my wedding jewelry, my mother's pearls, and sold them. Said she needed to buy Andre new clothes. Andre, he's unbearable. He bullies Mason, eats his snacks. He even hit him once, Stella, before the incident with the stitches. Her words spilled out between choked sobs, each one heavier, more painful than the last. Mason cried too, a frightened, confused sound, holding tightly to her. I didn't say anything. I just wrapped my arms around both of them and held them gently, offering what little comfort I could. Then, I took them out to eat, to a quiet little diner I'd discovered. At dinner, I watched them settle. Lily's shoulders gradually lowered from around her ears. Mason's tentative smile slowly returned. The tension in the air softened, and so, surprisingly, did a small corner of my heart. After we finished, we walked out into the cool evening air. That's when I saw Matt standing in the parking lot, hands shoved deep into his pockets, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow and tired. His face was etched with a frustration, a weariness, that I recognized all too well. He looked like a man unraveling at the seams, caught in the very chaos he once thought he could control, a man now reaping the bitter harvest of the life he so confidently, so arrogantly chose. And for the first time, looking at him, I didn't feel bitter. I felt almost nothing, certainly no pity, just a distant, detached sort of recognition. I glanced at Matt, my expression carefully neutral, then looked away. Mason will stay with me for a few days, I said calmly to Lily. Once things settle down at your place, I'll bring him back. She nodded, grateful but visibly exhausted. Just as I turned to lead Mason to my car, I heard Matt's voice, low, shaky, call out behind me. Mum? I paused but didn't turn. Mum, I was wrong. I really was. I was so stupid. I thought Bianca cared about us. I thought she was genuine. But now I see it. She only wanted Dad's money. Our money. Mom, can you come back? His voice cracked, filled with a remorse so profound, so different from the arrogant entitlement he used to wear like a second skin. But it was too late. Yes, he had finally seen Bianca for who she really was, but in the process, I had also seen them, all of them, for who they truly were. I didn't turn around. I didn't respond. I simply took Mason's small hand in mine and walked away. Whatever remained between mother and son had already eroded, lost in every justification he'd made for them, every time he defended outsiders over me, every barb he'd thrown. On the third day Mason was with me, Matt called again. This time his voice was frantic, laced with a raw panic I hadn't heard before. Dad had a stroke, he said, his voice trembling. He's in the hospital. Please, Mom, can you come? I hesitated. A long, complicated moment stretched between us. Then, maybe out of some deeply ingrained habit, some vestige of a 40-year connection that refused to completely sever, or maybe just for a final, definitive closure, I went. It had been months since I'd last seen Lewis. He looked frail, shrunken, almost unrecognizable. His hair, what was left of it, was now fully white, his skin ashen, sunken against his bones. He lay in the stark white hospital bed, like a withered husk, his breath shallow, his eyes dim, unfocused, until they landed on me. Then something flickered in them, a spark of recognition, of something else. He tried to lift his hand, to speak, but nothing came out, only a guttural sound, and tears, slow and thick, welled in his eyes and traced paths down his ravaged cheeks. Matt stepped in, his face pale, his own eyes red-rimmed. Bianca. Bianca tried to take more money from Dad. When he refused, when he finally said no, she and Andre, they pushed him. He hit the floor hard. After that, they cleaned out the house. Jewelry, electronics, anything of value. We've already filed a police report. The doctors said. They said he'll likely never walk again. He might not even talk properly. Matt's voice trembled, his gaze fixed on his father, as if expecting me to break down, to rush to Lewis's side, to offer comfort, forgiveness, to somehow make it all better. But I didn't. It all felt like the final, inevitable scene in a play I'd already read 1,000 times. I knew the ending. I turned to leave. "Stella," Lewis rasped behind me, his voice a hoarse whisper. He was trying to reach for my hand, his fingers inching, trembling, toward mine. I stepped back, just out of his reach. His eyes instantly filled with more tears, his voice thick with a desperate, broken regret. "Stella, I'm sorry." I thought maybe I'd feel something then. Pity, vindication, even a grim sort of relief. But I didn't. I looked at him, at the ruin of the man he had become, coldly, dispassionately. "There's nothing left between us, Lewis. You don't owe me an apology. We're strangers now." And with that, I turned and walked out. Matt ran after me, catching up in the brightly lit, sterile hallway. "Mom, Dad's in no condition to care for himself. We both have jobs. Lily's barely coping as it is. We can't manage this alone. Can you just help a little? Just check in now and then, please?" I looked at him, this son who once called me cold-hearted, who once told me not to expect anything from him, and all I saw was desperation disguised as a belated, convenient sense of duty. The hypocrisy was staggering. Now that their carefully constructed lives had spiraled into chaos, now that their happily ever after with Bianca had crumbled into dust and recriminations, suddenly I was useful again, needed again. I gave him a hard, bitter smile. "No, Matt. We divorced, remember? And you're an adult. I raised you, I clothed you, fed you, educated you, launched you into the world. I owe you nothing more. From today on, don't ever come to me again for this." I turned and walked away. Behind me, Matt's voice rose in frustration, in disbelief. "I'm your son. You could at least help me. How can you be so heartless? I'm struggling here and you don't even care." I heard him choke on his own words, a sound of pure, unadulterated desperation, but I didn't stop. I didn't flinch. He'd forgotten something crucial. This path, this life, they chose it. And I simply chose not to be dragged down by it any longer. Suddenly, my vision spun a little, the sterile white walls of the corridor tilting precariously. My steps faltered. A nurse passing by reached out a steadying hand. "Are you all right, ma'am?" she asked, her voice kind. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and kept walking. I never looked back. Later, I heard that Bianca and her son, Andre, had been arrested. Fraud, theft, elder abuse, the charges piled up. Turns out that congenital heart condition she wept about for years, the one that had supposedly kept Andre a perpetual dependent, was a complete fabrication. The doctors found nothing wrong with him, not a single thing. It had all been a long con, a sob story carefully crafted to trap Lewis, to manipulate him, to drain him dry, for decades. Her son, Andre, had been aimless for years, no job, no direction, just a parasite trailing in his mother's destructive shadow. No one wanted to take responsibility for him, no one could control him, except Lewis, the old fool, so eager to play savior, so desperate for a love he thought he'd been denied. Bianca clung to him like a lifeline, her hands around his neck financially and emotionally, for decades, until he had absolutely nothing left to give. People always pay for their choices, sooner or later. Lewis, he paid in full. Time is a strange thing. It doesn't rewind. It doesn't pause until you're ready. It simply moves forward, quietly, steadily, taking you through one turn after another, Until one day, if you're lucky, you finally understand. No more strained grins, no more pretending, just moments that are honest and wholly mine. As for Matt and Lily, eventually, inevitably, their marriage came to an end. The weight of daily life, the accumulated resentments, the financial strain of supporting a disabled and embittered Lewis crushed whatever fragile bond they had left. Arguments, silences, disappointments, they finally wore each other down. Neither had the strength, nor perhaps the desire to keep pretending. Lily packed up and moved out, taking Mason with her. She started over, on her own terms. I didn't judge her. I didn't offer advice I hadn't been asked for. I didn't say much at all. But on the day they left, I made a table full of her favorite dishes. I hugged her gently, and I pulled Mason into my arms one more time, his small body warm against mine. "You're a good mother, Lily," I told her softly. Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. Matt, eventually, moved into a small, bleak apartment alone. Every now and then he would call to share some updates about Lewis, about his own struggles. His voice was quieter now, worn around the edges, no longer sharp with entitlement, but dulled by the relentless attrition of life and regret. That's how life works, I suppose. Some people have to crash headfirst into their own consequences before they can begin to feel the pain they've inflicted on others. I'm not cold, I'm not heartless. I've just learned not to keep cutting myself open to bandage others, especially those who wielded the knife. I've also come to accept a deeper, harder truth. Not every relationship is worth saving. Not every bond deserves forgiveness. What truly matters isn't who stays, but whether you stayed true to yourself. Now, I no longer compromise my peace for anyone. I no longer lower myself, diminish myself, to fit into someone else's narrow definition of comfort or convenience. I cook meals just for me, meals that nourish my body and delight my senses. I brew tea in the early morning sunlight that floods my kitchen, savoring the quiet ritual. I open a new book and read quietly until afternoon, letting the world slow down, just for a while. I'm no longer somebody's wife, no longer someone's mother in the all-consuming way I once was, no longer someone's shadow. I'm simply me. And for the first time in my entire life, I'm finally, truly, unequivocally living on my own terms. The years ahead may be short, but I have enough time left to shape this life, my life, into something I love. This time, the story belongs to me.